Welcome to Gold Silver Pros.
Hey everybody, it's Rob Kientz with GoldSilverPros.com. This is going to come out on January the 23rd, 2023. It is Mining Stock Monday, and as you know, on Mondays we like to cover various companies in the mining space that we like to take a look at that we think potential great deals for you guys. This is research and education for you. Please do your own due diligence. Today we're back to uranium, and we've done this 2 weeks in a row. Last week we had a really good uranium exploration company. This time we're going to do the royalty model. And the title of this presentation is The Best Way to Play the Uranium Resurgence is the Royalty Model. So I'm going to talk to you about the uranium resurgence first, and then we're going to talk about that royalty company in the uranium space that we think is a pretty good bet and one that we have covered before. And we're bringing it back to the program because we believe in it. We'll get right into the share, and we're going to go back to some of the charts that we had last week. If you missed last week's presentation on uranium, this is from the World Nuclear Association, and it's talking about supply and demand and where we're going to get it. So if this black line are the world requirements for uranium, that's to meet all existing planned development and existing nuclear reactors and other uses of uranium. And you can see we've been in shortage and have been in shortage since the early 1990s when there was a decided lack of supply from the market. Supply has started to come back, but it is still short. And you can see here, this area of white space indicates a lot of pent-up demand for uranium in the world. That is even with Fukushima and other issues with Germany closing down some of their nuclear reactors. A lot of those are coming back. Japan is restarting them. China is doing a lot. We talked about that last week, and the overall demand is going up. Here's the expected demand-supply relationship out to 2050. As you can tell, we're at a pretty big shortage. This is 2022. We're right here. It's going to more than double the need for uranium over the next 30 years. Because this is what everybody's trying to get. So this is the market, and most of it's market-based production. It's not coming from existing stockpiles or anything like that. All of this blue is what has to be produced. So we have to more than double the production that we have now to meet the requirements going out to 2050. And that's with the current demand based on the current plans for people to add nuclear reactors and use uranium in those types of projects. We haven't even gotten into the fact that we think the United States is about to re-ramp up uranium, and I'm going to get to that here in a moment. I put this chart out last week as well because this is what happened when Cigar Lake kind of shut down. It had a flooding issue. That was one big plant that affected the overall uranium price. If you go back to what could happen if the overall market is in deficit and we really need it, and there aren't all clean alternatives, which aren't, and I'll get to that in a moment, that eventually that price for uranium has to come up. It has come up. It's come back up into around the $50 range. It's got a long way to go, however, to get it back to where a lot of these uranium mines need to come online to supply this, because most of the uranium mines we have now aren't going to supply at current prices. That's why we have the deficit. So the deficit's here because of price. We need to get the price up, and we know that additional demand's coming. So that price at some point is going to do something like this. It may not be a straight vertical line like we had here with the closure of that mine, but it could approach those price levels. It would not surprise me at all. In fact, if you look at all of the different requirements for uranium going out to 2050, it wouldn't surprise me if we saw a $200 price or even a little bit higher, although that's speculative. I do expect the prices to come up quite a bit, and for a lot of that new supply that's waiting for a little bit higher prices uranium to come online so we can deal with the deficits. There's a nice little interview here on Fox News with Amir Adnani, who runs Uranium Energy Corp and also involved in Uranium Royalty Corp with Fox, and he has a pretty good point about the government becoming more interested in uranium and investing in energy domestically. And I'm going to show you where there is support for that, but he makes some pretty good points.
Yeah, good morning, Amir. So, President Trump got us to energy independence to the point where the United States was a net energy exporter for the first time in history. It was a remarkable achievement. And now, just 2 years into Biden, and we are back on energy dependent on some of the world's worst regimes. But it seems pretty clear to me that all of us need to stop looking for logical reasons for what's going on. And it's very clear that energy is obviously the biggest lever available to the Biden administration, to the left, to effectuate this radical re-engineering of the U.S. economy. So yes, while the left talks about some top-line concern for climate and the environment, the real reason that they're really going after energy is because they want to leverage it into remaking the entire U.S. economy, energy being number one.
Look, at the end of the day, what President Trump did was to establish what we call today the National Uranium Reserve. This was the first time since the Eisenhower administration that the U.S. recognized the vulnerabilities that we have, the dependence that we have on foreign imports. The reality is the Communist Party of China and Russia have outmaneuvered, outmuscled, and outsmarted the companies in the West when it comes to grabbing market share globally for nuclear energy. We got to get it back.
Yeah.
President Trump recognized that. Today, all we need to do in the U.S., all President Biden needs to do is support domestic capabilities to control our own supply chains. Energy starts with being able to dig material out of the ground, hydrocarbons, minerals, and we must not be afraid of digging. I'm sorry to say this, but what's wrong with digging? We keep investing in above ground infrastructure, but if we don't have the raw material to actually process, then we actually don't control the supply chains. President Biden should really, instead of focusing on investing capital abroad, do it domestically. Help us.
So basically what Amir is saying is invest domestically, get our energy independence. We definitely have a lot of that with natural gas, and with oil, we have it a lot less with uranium, and forget all the political stuff that was in there. But it's a good point about gaining bipartisan support and congressional support. And here is something that Uranium Royalty Corp put out a recent study on uranium, and it looks like there is bipartisan support. Biden administration wants congressional approval, allowing purchase of some domestic uranium. You're getting, the infrastructure bill signed into law that provides nuclear credit program for qualifying nuclear plants. The U.S. wants to get 100% carbon pollution free. How do you do that with uranium? We'll talk about that in a moment. So there is some support. And there was a separate survey done by, printed at Visconti.com, where they just surveyed people across the United States. Are you favorable, not favorable to nuclear energy? And public opinion was very favorable. You can see by the green here on the chart that public opinion is very strong towards nuclear energy. 86% of people agree that we should renew the license of nuclear power plants. 84% agreed that our nation should prepare now so the advanced design nuclear power plants come out so we get more efficient and better use of our uranium. And then 72% agreed we should definitely provide more nuclear power plants. So the American public is definitely in favor. Congress seems to be in favor. We just need to get everybody aligned and moving in the same direction. And why is this push to uranium in light of all these ESG initiatives, environmental, social, governance initiatives? Because it's carbon free. It's one of the cleanest energies to meet ESG initiatives. Regardless of what you think about the ESG initiatives, they're there. They're going to affect energy policy going forward. And obviously nuclear is the cleanest of those from a carbon standpoint, even cleaner than solar, geothermal, hydropower, and wind, which is something that the renewable energy people don't talk about that often. But there is a dirtiness to creating these types of electricity that you don't see in nuclear, and that's not often talked about. So I think nuclear is good. And nuclear is also safe. You look at the amount of fatalities for the nuclear industry as compared to other industries. It is one of the safest. We don't have a lot of Chernobyls. We don't have a lot of meltdowns, and we don't have a lot of, deaths and things like that at the nuclear power plants. It is a very safe, and it's also very reliable. And I can speak to this when we had that polar vortex we call Snowmageddon came to Texas a couple of years ago. My daughter and I were in Austin traveling and stuck with no source of food, and we lost grid power. And one of the reasons that Texas lost a lot of grid power is simply because we were relying a lot on non-winterized natural gas, solar, and wind. And the solar just stopped working because it's bad weather, no sun. The wind turbines stopped turning and producing electricity. A lot of the natural gas facilities started to freeze up. And the thing that held us up was nuclear. And you can see it in this chart. When polar vortexes come, nuclear is the one that supports the nation and keeps the heat up and running and keeps the electricity and keeps emergency services and hospitals and things like that. Without nuclear, we would not survive our weather events that seem to come quite often now. We've had a 50-year weather event in Texas 2 years ago, and then we had a really nasty one last year as well. So Mother Nature wants to throw a little bit more weather at us. The only way that we're going to be able to stand up to that in the U.S. is nuclear, because it's the most reliable when you have weather events. So what is the company I'm talking about, and why is the royalty model more important, or one of the best ways to play nuclear? We know nuclear has to grow. I mean, if you just look at supply and demand right there, nuclear is going to grow. It's the only safe, reliable, clean, ESG approved, capable baseload power source. You're not going to get it with coal or natural gas, even though natural gas is fairly clean. It's not as clean And a lot of people in the Congress want to shut down natural gas. So certainly coal is not clean. The fossil fuels are not as clean, and even hydroelectric and geothermal are all very limited here in the U.S. So we can't run our whole grid off of that. They're just additions to, but even then there's some dirtiness and pollution in facilitating those types that you don't get with uranium. So UROY is the company. The royalty model is so important, and that's what I'm going to talk about. Oh, by the way, you can trade UROY. We have them on the program several times. They're in the NASDAQ here in the U.S., a big company in the uranium space, and on the Toronto Venture Stock Exchange there in Canada. First mover advantage. They're the first company to successfully apply the royalty and streaming business model to the uranium sector, and it's very important that they did this, because this is helping a lot of uranium companies get the financing they need to get this very critical mineral that is so important to our energy independence up. You can see here on management at the board, I've talked to Scott Melby before and interviewed him. He has 38 years of experience in roles with Cameco, Uranium One, Uranium Participation, former strategic advisor to Kazatomprom, and you'll see that relationship further on throughout the presentation as we get to it. Amir Adnani is the chairman. He's the president and CEO of Uranium Energy Corp, chairman of gold mining, and has a long history in the mining space of being successful. Wanted to talk a little bit about the share structure. They have about 117 million shares fully diluted outstanding. They're trading right now at about $2.50 on the markets. You can get an update on that by going to Yahoo Finance and typing in UROY. Key shareholders: Uranium Energy Corp, Amir Adnani's corporation, Altius, Mega, Marin Katusa, Extract Capital, Rick Rule, Sprott Global. A lot of the consistent faces and people that you'll see in the commodity sector that are big investors. They have a big portfolio. I wanted to highlight all the companies they're dealing with, major name brands here. So Uranium Royalty Corp is dealing with the best companies. That means they're going to get the best production, which means they're going to get the most money because they're partnering with the best companies to actually produce the stuff. And that's how the royalty model works. Royalties allow you to finance these companies and their production and what they need to get their projects up and running for pennies on the dollar. And not only is Uranium Royalty able to get uranium for pennies on the dollar in terms of paper value, they're actually storing uranium as the prices are much lower than they expect they'll need to be for this uranium revolution that's coming. So they actually have millions of pounds of uranium in storage. We'll show you that in a moment. Here is their asset portfolio. Athabasca Basin is big. We talked last week about how big Athabasca Basin is. 10 of the 15 highest grade uranium projects in the world exist in the Athabasca Basin, and this company has Athabasca Basin projects. Of course, that includes Cigar Lake. Who is Cigar Lake? Well, when Cigar Lake shut down in 2006, 2007, this is what happened to the uranium price. Cigar Lake is a pretty darn important uranium project. Well, guess what? They're also in the Athabasca Basin. So Athabasca Basin. So that's where you want to go in North America if you're interested in uranium. Here is the partnership they have with Yellowcake PLC, where they store it. This is the storage facility. Yellowcake is a long-term supply agreement with Kazatomprom. So Scott Melby has a relationship with Kazatomprom, and so does the company through Yellowcake in order to store, and they have an option to acquire a lot of uranium up until 2028, I believe, up to $21 million a year. And I think right now the holding for Yellowcake is 18.8 million pounds. Not quite all of that is theirs. They have increased their physical uranium concentrate up to 1.5 million pounds, a weighted average cost of $42.31. So as that uranium price spikes, when you see these dynamics happen, when you see supply and demand causing the price to go up, this is what they're going to be able to sell at this price. But what we think is going to be somewhere closer in here to get all these projects started. So they're basically getting uranium, actual physical uranium, pennies on the dollar. I wanted to highlight the Athabasca Basin properties because we talked about that last week. It is such a huge player in the world uranium market. It is so important that if you're looking at major projects, you must include, for uranium, you must include Athabasca Basin in your target list because they're some of the highest quality in terms of purity uranium in the world and some of the biggest projects as well. This is where you go to play if you go to play in uranium. But in addition, if we go back up to their map, they also have a lot in the United States, which I'm really interested in. They have a lot in Nevada and Utah where there has been some historic production of uranium here in the United States. They're up in Reno Creek. They're up in these states up here, Blind River over here. You know, they're down here in Africa in this area, which is a known producing area. So they're kind of all over the world, but they have a lot of concentration in North America and really good properties. These are the properties I have. You can go through the presentation and look at them. The great thing about the royalty model is they don't have to worry about and this is the slide I wanted to get to, they don't have to worry about operations. So you can buy an operating company. This is a miner. You can buy an ETF, or you can go into the physical funds, and there's these drawbacks to it. You have these different costs or things that you have to do. On the Royalty Corp, they just finance production, and then all of the CapEx, the OpEx, the management headaches stay with the operating companies. Uranium Royalty doesn't have to deal with it. They're a financing company that actually happens to have not only the cash from projects, but they're going to get the uranium and they're going to resell in a better market and actually be part of that solution and that supply. And by holding it back now, they're allowing that price to reach where it needs to be to fund these projects, and then they can sell it out. It's a really, just a really, really good way to hold value and to reduce your risk, your CapEx and your OpEx expenditures. If these companies have to do it, it goes on their balance sheet, not on Uranium Royalty Corp. The deal is the deal when you sign up. A couple of analyst ratings, I'm just going to show these real quick. Canaccord Genuity has a price target of $6 for the company. Wainwright has a price target of $570, just about the same. It's trading at about $250 US, so there's a lot of room to run for this uranium company, Uranium Royalty, UROY. I keep having them on the program because I really believe in royalty companies, and this is really the first mover royalty in the uranium space. And I believe uranium is in a big bull market and must continue to go forward. I do not see an alternative to the stability, the reliability, the safety, and the availability of nuclear power when compared with all the other powers that we have available to us, power sources for baseload. You just cannot replace nuclear. The world has realized that. People are moving back towards it. We talked about it this week and last week. The whole world is moving back towards uranium. And after seeing the energy situation flare up in Europe as a result of the Russia-Ukraine war, and you see what happens when Germany had shut down its nuclear. Now it's running something like 60% of its electricity out of coal. That's dirty energy. It does not fit ESG initiatives. It cannot stand. Germany is going to have to reestablish their uranium. And right now, I think they're getting most of their natural gas from either Poland or some other European country that was getting a lot of it from France. And Germany is just totally dependent on other people. If they had kept their uranium, they would be more energy independent. And so you can see what happens geopolitically when you don't have energy independence. Energy independence, the direction and wealth of the nation and of the people are all tied together. And uranium is one of the biggest catalysts for inexpensive, clean, safe, reliable energy that just works. And when you turn on your light switch, you've got that power, and it's going to be the base load choice going forward. I have no doubt about that. That has been the presentation. The best way to play the uranium resurgence is the royalty model. I agree with that. It is one of the lowest cost and safest ways to do it. UROY is the primary player in that space. They have the right companies, the right projects, the right investors, the right model, and they've got uranium sitting in a storage facility they're going to sell and make some money as well. Seems to me to be pretty much a slam dunk. We'll see what happens going forward, but I think uranium is a good way. And you guys do your own due diligence, but hopefully this has been very educational for you guys. Until next time, Rob Kientz with Gold Silver Pros.
Hey, thanks for watching. We selected these videos just for you. Check them out. And remember, $4.99 a month keeps the lights on and the channel going. So join our Gold Silver Pro supporter membership. We appreciate your support. Keep stacking.